So, when you hear the word stewardship or being a good steward, what comes to mind? Like, legit, think for just a second, maybe even discuss amongst yourselves. What comes to mind? Like, what is the image or the thoughts that come to mind when you hear the word steward or stewardship? So often when we hear the word steward, like we're being good stewards of something, or the term stewardship, so often when we hear that, we think immediately probably to like finances, like, oh, I want to be a good steward of my finances. Or we just think in very specific terms. But really, did you know that biblical stewardship is one of the primary ways that Christ calls us to live our life? That it's not just a one thing or a one area. It definitely isn't just about our finances, but that Christ calls us to live like all of our lives under the umbrella of stewardship. Stewardship is a theme in the Bible. You can trace it from Genesis all the way to Revelation. Like beginning to end, we see the concept of stewardship in our lives. It's a calling rooted in creation, highlighted throughout the entire Bible, and it influences the way that we live our life for the glory of God. So if that's the idea of stewardship, if the idea of stewardship is start to finish impacting the entire way that we live our lives, then one, it's really important, and two, it's all encompassing. It's not one thing or another. It really is everything. In general, to steward is to manage something on someone else's behalf. Stewardship in the Bible has to do with understanding that life is not your own. Your life is not your own. Your life is on loan from God, and God calls you to steward everything about your life for His glory and the good of others. So you may be sitting there and you're like, Marita, what do you mean my life isn't my own and that like my life belongs to God? So again, stewardship, Genesis to Revelation. In Genesis, we see that we're created by God. God created man or male and female, man and woman. He created them. So God creates us. He's our Father. He's our Creator. So that alone should lay out the idea that like He owns our lives, that like we're not owning them, we're just stewarding them. But then we see in the New Testament that God gives His Son Jesus to die on the cross. He gives Jesus's life. And there's a verse in the New Testament that I'm blanking on in this moment, but it says that we were bought at a price. We, as believers, as children of God, we were bought at the price of the life of Jesus. So Jesus lays down His life on the cross. His blood is shed so that we could stand in right relationship with God. That means that we, not only were we created by God, but we were bought at the price of Jesus's life. So that means if we've been bought, that we don't own this life. We're not really the ones who are in control of this life. I mean, we are in control of this life, but we're not the ones who own it. God created us and He bought us. Therefore, essentially, we are stewards of this life that we're getting to live. Again, to steward is to manage something on someone else's behalf. So really, God created us. Jesus bought our life. Therefore, we are stewarding this life on behalf of Jesus and God. God the Father, Jesus the Son. So if we're stewarding this life on behalf of them, then again, I would challenge us to think and to consider and to understand that stewardship is so much more than just one area. It's definitely so much more than just finances, but stewardship encompasses every single aspect and avenue and dynamic and area of our life. In Chi Alpha world, you may have come across this already, or this may be the first time that you're hearing about the 3 R's. I'm just going to go ahead and acknowledge that they don't all start with R, but we're talking about each of them as real something. So the 3 reals, the 3 R's. And so in Chi Alpha world, we talk about real devotion, meaning real devotion to Jesus. We talk about real responsibility, and then we talk about real community. I would challenge us that if we want to be good stewards of the life that God has given us, that we have to pay attention to real devotion, to real responsibility, and to real community. We cannot be good stewards of God without the 3 R's being present in our lives and just really paying close attention to them. We cannot be a good steward of God without real devotion. Real devotion means devotion to Jesus. Real devotion means a very deep, kind of unwavering love for Jesus in our lives. Real devotion doesn't mean a devotion to this community, although we're going to talk about community. It doesn't mean a devotion to life group and TNL. It doesn't even mean devotion to just living in a godly way. Real devotion is a call to devoting our heart and our lives to Jesus and to relationship with him. Years ago, literally like 10 years ago, I led my first mission trip to Haiti. And we had this girl on our team, we're gonna call her Marianne. And so Marianne's on our team. She's tiny, like literally, I'm not 100% sure that Marianne weighed 100 pounds, like soaking wet, so to speak. And so we're headed out for this mission trip to Haiti. We know that it's gonna be rough. We know that it's gonna be hardcore labor. Like we're set up for a really hard, but really committed to Jesus, week and a half of serving in Haiti. And we're sitting on a plane. We flew from New Orleans to Miami, and we're now sitting on the plane in Miami waiting to head to Haiti. And I'm sitting in a seat, and Marianne is on one side of me, and then our friend Megan was sitting on the row as well. I think maybe it was me, then Marianne, and then Megan, and then a couple of our other, friends are sitting behind us. And Marianne, again, very tiny. Marianne's sitting and she's examining her wrist. And she's like, man, my wrists are so small. Like my wrists are so tiny. And I'm going to be really honest. I just ignore the comment and the conversation. And Megan, being the incredibly sweet girl that she was, Megan chimes in and she's like, but Marianne, like your wrists are in proportion to your body. Like it would look weird if you had these giant wrists, right? Marianne's response then, as she's continuing to examine her wrist, is, but I just hope they last my whole life. Here's why I'm sharing this. Here's what I want you to consider. When you look at your devotion to Jesus, do you look at it and go, it's kind of small. I hope it lasts my whole life. Or are you living in such devotion to Jesus that when you look at it, you know and are assured that you're going to walk faithfully this life all the way into eternity in solid relationship with the Father? We should have such a devotion to Jesus that it doesn't matter the circumstances, it doesn't matter the seasons, it doesn't matter where we find ourselves. We've got such a rock solid devotion deep down inside of us that we are committed and devoted to Jesus. I want to challenge you that as you consider your devotion to Jesus in your life, I want you to consider, is it dependent upon other things, or is it solely dependent upon who he is and even what he's done for you? Man, Jesus is the Son of God, fully man, came down, gave his life for us. There should be a level of devotion to him in our lives that is unwavering. When I look at the devotion in my life, I shouldn't have to wonder if it's going to last my whole life. I should know with great assurance that I am so devoted and committed to Jesus that nothing is going to rock this boat. Nothing is going to rock my devotion to Jesus. If we want to be good stewards of God, of this life that he's given us, we have to live with real, wholehearted, just fully committed devotion to Jesus. I think about the lyrics that we sing so often. I've heard people say that Christians don't tell lies, they sing them. I think that's so true sometimes. Like we sing these songs and we make these bold declarations that really we have no intention of living out. There's a song that, we sing often, and The Refiner's Fire, I think is the name of it. But the lyric says, I want to be tried by fire, purified. You take whatever you desire. Lord, here's my life. And I realized last year sometime that I don't want to sing that song. Here's the deal. If the fire comes, that's fine. And Like I will stand firm and I will be devoted, but I'm not beckoning the fire to come and to purify me, right? Like I just realized, man, I'm singing these words that honestly in my heart I don't mean. And when I was having that kind of thought and conversation, it was right after my mom had passed away. So I felt like I was in the fire. And so then I'm like, I don't want to stand and sing songs beckoning more fire. Like I am trying to navigate the fire that I'm in already. The reason I say that is I want you to think as you're standing in worship on a Thursday night or on a Sunday morning, I don't want you to just sing songs of devotion. I want you to think about what it is. I want you to think about what you're singing. And I want it to challenge you to live that life of devotion. There's a song by Hillsong United actually called Devotion. Fantastic song from a really old album of theirs. And part of the maybe refrain or chorus, I don't know what the parts of songs are called, but it says, I will take up my cross and follow, Lord, where you lead me. And I will take up my cross and follow wherever you go. I want to challenge you again, as you think about lyrics like that, are they just words that you're willing to sing? Or is it a life that you're willing to live that matches the words that you sing? Another really popular song in kind of recent history is Oceans, as well, by Hillsong United. And so it says, Spirit, lead me where my trust is without borders. Let me walk upon the waters wherever you would call me. Take me deeper than my feet could ever wander, and my faith will be made stronger in the presence of my Savior. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these songs. I think they're beautiful, and I think they do incredible things to encourage us in our faith and to sing proclamations to God. What I want to challenge you is to sing proclamations that you live out in a life of devotion. That as you're singing these songs, that they're not just words that are coming off our lips. They're not just songs that are catchy and they sound good or they're popular, but that really they're life proclamations for us. That, man, I am willing. God, bring the fire. I'm willing to be refined because I'm so devoted to you. Lord, wherever you ask me to take up my cross, I'm going to follow. God, lead me beyond where my faith has already taken me into a deeper place with you. But let's not just sing songs and not live out a life of wholehearted devotion. Let's not sing songs because they're catchy and because they sound great or because it's what we're singing in a worship service. But let's live lives of devotion, wholehearted devotion that matches the songs that we're willing to sing. Real devotion goes beyond the lyrics and the season and the circumstances. Real devotion walks us from today into eternity, loving and serving God and others. Meaning there's a real devotion to my life that is unwavering. There's a real devotion to my life that I'm not going to walk away from Jesus at some point. I am committed. It doesn't matter the waves that come. It doesn't matter the circumstances. It doesn't matter what I have in my hands or what I have in my life. What I have is a real devotion to Jesus. Because, man, I was bought at a price. I was created by the Creator God of the universe to be in relationship with Him. And I am devoted to this life with Him. Isaiah 29:13 says, the Lord says, these people come near to me with their mouth and honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Their worship of me is based on merely human rules that they have been taught. See, the thing is, we're not interested, as a ministry, Chi Alpha, we're not interested in making good Chi Alpha members. We're not interested in just making good life group leaders. What we're interested in is helping students develop relationship with Jesus that will walk them from today all the way into eternity. That, man, doesn't matter where you find yourself, that you're living in wholehearted devotion to Jesus. As Isaiah is warning here, the words of God is warning us in Isaiah, let us not be people that it's just about words that we speak or maybe trying to fit in and follow rules. But let us be people that have drawn near to the heart of God in a life of real devotion to Jesus. If we want to be good stewards of what God has given us, then we have to have real, solid, unwavering devotion to Jesus. Not only do we need real devotion to Jesus, we need to walk with real responsibility in our lives. If we want to be good stewards of what God is doing, we live with real devotion to Jesus and we walk with real responsibility in our lives. Real responsibility means that we're responsible in all areas of our lives. It means that I'm being responsible with my finances, that I'm being responsible with my time, that I'm being responsible with my relationships, that I'm being responsible with people, that I'm being responsible with my studies, that I'm being responsible with the gospel. Real responsibility means I'm living a whole life of responsibility. It means that anything that is being placed before me, I am being responsible with that. Basically, that I'm doing my best, that I'm stewarding it to the utmost of my abilities. And the thing with God is, here's the thing that I think probably I realized the most as a college student in Chi Alpha. I walked into Chi Alpha as a Christian, had been serving the Lord basically my whole life, had grown up in church. And I still think probably the thing that I walked away with the most, or the thing that was the most impactful for me, is that I realized that God wanted to be in every single aspect of my life. It wasn't like, oh, I have a relationship with God and then there's the rest of my life. I realized in college that God wanted to be woven through the very fabric of my life, meaning he wants to be a part of all of it. There's nothing in my life that God doesn't want to touch or to be a part of. And I think to live in real responsibility, to be a good steward of what God is doing, and to live in real responsibility means that I am taking responsibility, I'm taking ownership, I am stewarding well every single piece and place of my life. Where are the places in your life that maybe you've kind of been shucking off? Where are the places in your life that you're like, oh, it doesn't matter? Where are the places in your life that honestly, if you sat and really examine, you would find that you're coming up a little short in the area of responsibility? One conversation that God and I keep having recently, if I'm just being honest, is being really responsible with my free time. I'm gonna be honest, I like to be lazy, y'all. I do. I like to binge Netflix. I love to waste time on social media and Hulu. I love to hang out with my dog. I love Rufus Henry, and I want to spend all my free time with him. And what I'm realizing lately is that I'm just not being responsible with my free time. I'm really not. Spending my time on social media and Netflix and Hulu is not being responsible with the life that God has given me. And I'm not saying that we can't have those things and that we can't use those things, but if they're like sucking all of our time and we're maybe not just doing the best that we could be doing in life, we're not being responsible with that time because we're just like chunking it out the window on Netflix and Hulu and social media, then we're not being good stewards and we're not being responsible. And I really feel lately like the Lord is challenging me in that. So maybe instead of sitting on my couch and just binging Netflix at night, I should be reading things that are going to build my relationship with God and that are going to build my spirit. I should be reading things to grow in knowledge of God and grow in knowledge of just the things that have been entrusted to me. I should be investing in my community more. There's just so many things that I could be doing in a more responsible way with my time. I left the house the other day and I told Rufus when I left, I think it was like a Monday morning. So I'd been home pretty much all weekend, just hanging out with Rufus. I've been fighting some sinus stuff, so I've been home a bit more, just trying to rest and, let my body recover. But I remember leaving and I just didn't want to leave Rufus and he's all snuggly and stuff. And I was like, man, bud, I have to leave because life has to be about more than just me and you. And that's the truth of it. When we are being good stewards of what God has given us, when we're living real lives of responsibility, we understand that life is about more than just the things that we want to indulge in. I mean, Rufus Henry, he's probably the cutest dog that has ever existed in the history of dogs. We can just all agree on that. But my life is about more than him. And to live in real responsibility and stewardship of what God has given me, I need to understand that, and I need to be utilizing my time in better ways. And again, it doesn't mean I can't hang out with him. Obviously, I am responsible for him. It doesn't mean that I can't watch Netflix or Hulu or whatever, but it just means I need to take a hard look at my life and go, am I being really responsible with the time that's been entrusted to me? And if I'm not, then how can I be more responsible? How can I improve in that area? There's a story in the Bible in the New Testament, and I'm not going to read the whole story, but jot this down. You can go back and read it later. Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 through 30. And you often hear it referred to as the parable of the talents. In some translations of the Bible, it gets referred to as the parable of the bags of gold. And so the rundown of this story is there's a guy and he's going away for a bit. So he calls 3 of his servants and he entrusts a little bit to each one of them. And so to the first servant, I believe he gives 5 bags of gold. The next servant comes, I believe it's 3 bags of gold. The last servant comes, it's a bag of gold. And so he's basically like, hey, steward these things, take care of these things, manage these things, and I'll be back. And so the first one, man, real responsibility in action. And he does things with the gold. And when the master comes back, he calls this guy in and he's like, man, master, like, I really wanted to do well with this. I'm paraphrasing things. He's like, man, I wanted to be real responsible. I wanted to be a good steward. And so he did things with it and he made more bags of gold. And so the master is like, man, you did a great job. You were so responsible. Way to be a good steward. Here, you can keep these things. The next guy comes in, very similar. He comes in with his 3. He's like, man, I wanted to do well. I wanted to be responsible. I wanted to steward well. And so then he made more with what he was entrusted. The last person comes, the last guy comes, and he's like, look, I knew you were a real hard master. And so buried that, and here you go. Like, I wanted to make sure you got back what it was that you gave me. And the master is like, what? Like, 1, he's like, that's the view that you have of me. And he's like, and 2, you weren't responsible with that at all. Like, you did the minimum. You did the minimum to get by with it. And now you want to be like, kind of proud of that even. Man, he wasn't responsible. He was just trying to get by with what had been put in his hands, not utilizing good stewardship or responsibility. Where are the areas of your life that maybe you're functioning a little bit more like the guy with the 1 bag of gold and not functioning like the others who are stewarding well? Again, I can tell you, I'm challenging myself in this. Come ask me sometime, man, how am I doing with the free time that's in my life? Because if I'm real honest, I think for too long, I'm treating it like the 1 bag of gold and I'm just kind of getting by with it rather than utilizing it and being responsible with it. So what are the areas in your life? Maybe there's areas that you're like, no, I am functioning in the level 5 bags of gold, like I'm doing great. But maybe there's some areas that you would really, if you take a hard look, you're willing to be honest and go, treating that a little bit more like a 1 bag of gold. And I really do need to execute some real responsibility in that area of my life. If we want to be good stewards, we've got to have real devotion to Jesus. And then we need to have real responsibility in all the areas of our life. And then the last R is that, man, if we want to be good stewards of what God has given us, we cannot neglect real community. We cannot neglect real community. And the thing is, real community isn't just being in proximity with one another. It's not just being around one another. Real community isn't just that I show up for life group and then I show up for TNL. Real community is about living our lives with one another. 1 Thessalonians 2:8, one of my favorite verses in the entire Bible. It says, so we cared for you because we loved you so much. We were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. We were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. Not part of our life, not a little bit of our life, our lives as well. One passage that often gets highlighted when we talk about community is Acts chapter 2. It's what we call the early church. And there's a portion of scripture in Acts chapter 2 that talks about they gathered together daily, they had everything in common, they sold their belongings to take care of one another, they lived in real community. And then in Thessalonians, we're challenged that, man, because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well. If we're sharing our lives, it doesn't say that I'm sharing this piece of my life. Scripture isn't saying that I share parts of my life. It's saying we're sharing our lives. It's a whole and encompassing thing. Years ago, probably around the same time that I took that first trip to Haiti, I had a student named Rebecca. Rebecca actually was on that trip to Haiti with us. I think she was sitting on the row behind me and Marianne and Megan on the plane. But when Rebecca got ready to graduate, I was reading in 1 Thessalonians around that time. And this just like light bulb moment kind of went off for me. I'm like, man, me and Rebecca have been living out 1 Thessalonians 2:8. Because when Rebecca came into Chi Alpha, her first kind of step into leadership, she did I-teams. So she met with me, I was her person. Rebecca lived in the Chi Alpha house. The first time that I was here and serving with Chi Alpha, I lived in the Chi Alpha house for 5.5 years. Shout out to the Chi Alpha house. But I lived there for 5.5 years in community with students. And so Rebecca and I, for a few years, lived together in the Chi Alpha house. When Rebecca became a life group leader, at that point I was doing one-on-ones with female life group leaders. And so I was Rebecca's one-on-one person. We did at least one MGO together. I feel like maybe we did more, but I know for sure we did at least one Mardi Gras outreach together. And then we did a mission trip to Haiti together. And as I was thinking about Rebecca's time in Chi Alpha, as she was getting ready to graduate, I'm like, man, Rebecca and I have lived out 1 Thessalonians 2:8. I knew Rebecca's life. Rebecca knew my life. Not only had we shared the gospel together with one another, but we had shared our lives, like our whole lives. We knew each other well. We knew all the different pieces of each other's lives. We knew the ins and outs of things. Real community is not just showing up in proximity to people. Real community is that I am letting people into the entirety of my life, that I am living life with people, that I'm not hiding portions of my life. I'm not doing things in secret. I'm not popping up one day and be like, oh, look, here's my boo that you knew nothing about. But real community, I'm sharing my life with people. And the Bible talks about as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. When we live in community, we get sharpened in our faith. We get sharpened in our real responsibility. We get challenged in our real devotion. In real community, we reap incredible benefits, honestly. I am a better person today because of the real communities that I have lived in throughout the duration of my life. I think of my friend Missy when I was in college. Missy's still one of my best friends to this day. For 20-something years now, Missy has been one of my best friends. And I know that if I want to be challenged in something, or if I just want someone to speak real truth to me, if I want to be sharpened as iron sharpens iron, I call Missy. And I remember so many times in college, I would be discussing something in my life with Missy because we were in real community. We were living our lives together. And I would be discussing something with Missy. And Missy calls me Mur. And so she would be like, Mur, you need to, X, Y, Z, whatever the hard challenge was. And I'm like, but I don't want to. And she goes, but it builds character. Missy was concerned about my character. Missy was concerned about my relationship with God. Missy could be concerned about those things and challenge me in those things because we shared life together, because we were in real community with one another. Eventually, by the end of college, I'd have conversations with Missy, and she'd be like, but Mer, it builds character. And I'm like, leave my character out of this. My character's fine, Missy. And still to this day, like literally 20 years later, we'll have conversations, and she'll challenge me, and she'll speak truth because we have shared our lives together. Again, real community. If we're going to be great stewards of what God is doing, we need to be in real community. And real community is not just about proximity. It's about a deep sharing of our lives with one another. It's sharing the joys. We're celebrating with one another. It's sharing the hardships. We're uplifting one another. It's encouraging one another. It's challenging one another. It's providing for one another. Real community, again, we're sharing all of our life, the all-encompassing, holistic picture of our life we're sharing with one another. That's real community. In 1 Peter 4:8-10, it says, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Each of you should use whatever gift you have received to serve others as faithful stewards of God's grace in its various forms. So, real community. We're sharing our lives. We're sharing the gospel. We're sharing our lives. We're loving one another. We're offering hospitality to one another without grumbling. And then we're using our gifts that we've received to help one another. So I said a minute ago, in real community, we reap incredible benefits, but also in real community, we sow incredible things into the lives that are into the lives of those that are around us. Man, real community means I'm not just taking, I'm not just getting what I can out of this, but I'm willing to invest in this thing. If I'm going to steward real community, it means that I'm pouring in as much as I'm getting out. I have a real responsibility to the real community that I'm living in, because of my real devotion to Jesus. Honestly, that's the way it all lays out. I want to ask you, I want to challenge you, are you living in real community? Have you actually leaned into real community, that the people in this ministry or in your life group, the people that are around you, are speaking into your life, are challenging you? They know the depths of your life, and then you're pushing back in the same manner, or you're sowing back in the same manner of what you're reaping. Our lives, not our own, right? We were created by God. We were bought at a price. Therefore, we are merely stewards of the lives that God has entrusted us with. And if we want to be good stewards, then we need to live in a real wholehearted devotion to Jesus, not just to the community, not just to the surface level of things, a real deep, wholehearted devotion to Jesus. If we want to be good stewards, we live in real devotion to Jesus. We live with a real responsibility in all areas of our lives, and we lean in to real community. I want to challenge you to think in those areas and determine, how are you doing in the stewardship of your life? Are you really devoted to Jesus? Are there ways and spaces that you need to grow in that? Are you living in real responsibility in all the areas of your lives? And have you leaned into real community? Or are you just kind of testing the waters still, and it's time to actually take a step in? If we want to be good stewards of the life that God has given us, let us live with real devotion, with real responsibility, and in real community.